Imagine stepping into a luxurious first-class cabin, dressed sharp, carrying yourself with confidence, and ready for an important business trip. Now picture sitting down, only to feel invisible. No greeting. No eye contact. No offer of champagne, hot towel, or even the simple respect given to everyone else around you. That's exactly what happened to Dr. Maya Richardson, a self-made black CEO who had built one of the most successful health tech companies in the United States. She wasn't just any passenger. Her company was on the verge of signing a groundbreaking deal with global investors, a deal worth billions. But on this flight, none of that seemed to matter. To the flight crew, she wasn't a priority. She was, in their eyes, someone who didn't fit the image they had of first class. And as the minutes ticked by, the indignities piled up, while Maya stayed silent, carefully observing every detail. What the crew didn't know was that Maya was not only a leader but also someone who believed in holding people accountable, no matter how quietly or powerfully it had to be done. By the time the plane touched down, her silence would transform into a storm the airline would never forget. So how did a moment of arrogance and prejudice by a crew who thought they could get away with dismissing her end up shaking an entire airline? And how did Maya manage to turn her pain into power without raising her voice once? Stay with me, because this story will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. We open with Maya's morning. She had been up since 4 a.m., preparing for her flight from New York to San Francisco. This wasn't an ordinary trip. She was heading to finalize a deal with a group of Silicon Valley investors who had been chasing her company for months. Her health tech startup had developed AI-driven tools that were changing the way hospitals diagnosed and treated patients. The deal she was about to close was worth nearly $1.2 billion, a number she could barely wrap her mind around. Maya wasn't new to first-class cabins. She had traveled internationally, sat in private lounges, and attended meetings with some of the world's biggest players. But she had also lived through enough subtle and not-so-subtle racism to know that money, titles, or even fame couldn't always shield you. As she arrived at the gate, she noticed it immediately. The gate agent smiled warmly at the couple in front of her but gave Maya only a cold glance. "Boarding pass," the agent said flatly, without the cheerful tone given to the previous passengers. Maya didn't flinch. She had learned to save her energy. Walking into the plane, she saw the polished first-class section. Flight attendants welcomed passengers, helping them with bags, offering champagne. But when Maya reached her seat, there was silence. One attendant brushed past her, assisting a white businessman across the aisle, offering him a drink before takeoff. Another helped an elderly woman with her coat. Maya, however, sat there unnoticed. She tested the waters. "Excuse me," she said gently to the nearest attendant. "Could I have some water?" The attendant gave a stiff smile, almost forced, and replied, "We'll get to you in a moment," then walked away. That moment never came. As the flight continued, she saw the pattern unfold, meals served in order, yet hers was delayed. Others received menus and choices, but her tray appeared without a word, and the food looked cold. When she asked politely about a missing side dish, the attendant responded with, "That's how it comes." For a while Maya said nothing. She sat back, her hands folded, her mind calm. She had learned that sometimes silence was louder than protest. She noticed how nearby passengers threw her sympathetic glances, some confused at how differently she was being treated. But then something happened that cut deeper than all the slights combined. During dinner service, she looked down at her tray and froze. The bread roll on her plate had a spot of green mold. Not just stale. Not just overlooked. Moldy. Her chest tightened, not out of fear of eating it, but out of disbelief that no one had cared enough to check before serving her. She raised her eyes slowly to the attendant, who had just finished pouring wine for another guest. "Excuse me," Maya said evenly, holding up the plate. "This bread is moldy." The attendant glanced at it, shrugged, and replied, "Oh, I'll grab you another one. Mistakes happen." No apology. No urgency. Just dismissal. And in that moment, Maya's decision was made. She didn't argue. She didn't cause a scene. Instead, she carefully wrapped the bread roll in her napkin, placed it in her bag, and leaned back in her seat. She was going to wait. Because the attendants thought they were simply brushing aside another passenger. They didn't realize they were about to brush aside the woman whose company had contracts with some of the most powerful corporations in America. They didn't realize that her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. When the plane landed in San Francisco, the attendants barely acknowledged her as passengers disembarked. Maya, however, didn't rush. She walked off calmly, her bag over her shoulder, the moldy bread still carefully tucked inside. What the crew didn't know was that Maya had friends, very powerful friends, in the aviation industry. Her company's tech was being integrated into airport systems across the country, and she had direct ties with federal regulators, not to mention the investors waiting for her in Silicon Valley who were on the boards of several airlines. After leaving the terminal, Maya made one phone call. Just one. To the chairman of the airline's board. The moment he answered, Maya's voice was calm, steady, but filled with weight. She explained everything: the dismissive service, the cold treatment, and finally, the moldy bread served to her in first class. The chairman didn't need details about who Maya was, he already knew. Her reputation preceded her. The silence on the other end of the line told her everything she needed to know. Within hours, the story spread inside the airline. An internal investigation began. Crew names were flagged. Managers scrambled. And the truth? It wasn't the first time complaints had been made about those very attendants. But this time was different. Because Maya wasn't just a passenger. She was a leader with the platform, influence, and willpower to make sure accountability came. By the end of that week, 2 flight attendants were suspended, pending investigation. A senior manager at the gate was placed on leave. The airline issued a direct apology to Maya, not just privately, but publicly, in a press statement that made headlines across business and travel news. And yet Maya wasn't done. At her investor meeting in San Francisco, she used part of her speech to highlight how discrimination, no matter how small, poisons trust in industries built on service. She explained how her silence on the plane wasn't weakness, but patience to strike when the timing was right. The investors applauded her not just for her business acumen but for her courage to transform personal humiliation into public accountability. The billion-dollar deal closed that very week. The airline, meanwhile, saw its stock dip briefly as the headlines circulated. Shareholders demanded answers. Training programs were rewritten overnight. And the crew that once believed they could treat Maya like she didn't belong learned the hard way that every action carries consequences. So what do we take from Maya's story? First, silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means calculation. Maya could have shouted on that plane, demanded justice right there. But she chose a different kind of power. She chose to let her influence speak louder than her anger. Second, racism often hides behind small gestures. A delayed drink, a dismissive tone, a cold plate of food. It's not always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, creeping, meant to make someone feel less. But those small acts carry enormous weight, and they reveal everything about the people who commit them. And third, accountability matters. Maya didn't just let it go. She used her position to shine a light, not for revenge, but for change. Because for every powerful CEO who gets treated this way, there are countless everyday travelers who don't have the voice or platform to fight back. Her story reminds us all, never underestimate the quiet strength of someone you dismiss. You never know who they are, what they've built, or how one phone call from them could change everything. So the next time you see someone being treated unfairly, whether on a plane, in a restaurant, or in your workplace, remember Maya's story. Remember that silence can be strategy, and that respect should never be optional. Because in the end, true power doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it simply waits. And when it moves, it changes everything.